Welcome to Mistaken Identity. I'm Matt Denick. Today, I'll interview Randy Mercer, Chief Product Officer at One World Sync. We'll talk about how to understand and serve the demographics of your customers, as well as considerations for implementing AI at your company. Welcome to today's episode of Mistaken Identity. I'm Matt Denick. I'm excited to be joined today by Randy Mercer. Randy, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you, give us some insight into product content orchestration and what that means. And really excited to dive in today to get your experience on how you've thought about building, customer experiences, leveraging identity. But before we do all of that, maybe give the folks that are watching or listening to today's episode a bit of insight into what you do at One World Sync and what One World Sync does.
All right. Well, I'll start with what One World Sync does. So, the short story is we are a SaaS platform that sits between CPG manufacturers primarily. So think of any product you buy in a grocery store or mass merchandiser. We sit between those manufacturers and the retailers, right? The brick and mortar retailers, e-tailers, and so forth. And the purpose of our platform is to allow brands, the CPG manufacturers, to share content with the retailers that ultimately is going to enable item setup, supply chain operations, selling online, really operating all the sales channels. So that's what we do as a business. I run product management here at One World Sync. My history is I've been in this space for about 20 years, got into it mildly accidentally by helping a customer who was a CPG manufacturer that needed to do what our platform now does with that endeavor. And we basically grew that into a number of tools that we sell today.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into some of your experience in the CPG space. I know that at Okta and even within Identity, we're seeing a lot of interest from CPG companies and how they can build better experiences for their customers and better profiles, given some of the examples that you just gave. What led you to be Chief Product Officer at One World Sync?
Yeah, so I'll go back to about 20 years to the beginnings of the company that I now work for. And at the time, I worked for a software development organization, and I was a developer. And as I mentioned, I was approached by one of my customers, and they said, "Hey, we have to start putting our content, our product information in this platform. We don't know what it is. We don't know how to do it. Would you be willing to just figure it out for us and build us, write some code for us?" And so I did that, and very quickly realized that a lot of my other customers were going to have the same problem. And so we productized that original solution. And I co-sold that solution with my previous company and the one I now work for about 13 years before ultimately I just joined One World Sync to sell that solution internally to this organization. And about 5 years ago, took over the product management org, and then that led me to the role that I'm in today, which I've had for about a year now.
Well, that's awesome. So when you think about your role now as Chief Product Officer, what are some of the ways that you guide your teams, instruct your teams, lead your teams to think about how they execute on building a really great digital strategy for your customers?
The way that we think about our role with our customer base today goes way beyond just that master data alignment aspect that we serviced for so many years. And we now think, very much about the consumer experience, the digital experience, and how do we take that information that's in our platform and add solutions around that contribute to the consumer experience very holistically, right? And what I mean by that is when you look at a product on any e-com site, today we have solutions that really contribute content to pretty much every aspect of the detail that you'd see on that site. So for my product managers, it's really innate to the solutions that we're very focused on today as related to the consumer experience that we're trying to support there.
And balancing that customer experience, I got to believe, is a challenge for your product teams. But how do you think about, balancing that experience, but also keeping the content that you provide your customers impactful, accurate, up to date, and also how do you think about building new solutions and products for that customer base as well?
All right. So when you look at the aspects of keeping content current, that's really innate to just what we've done as a business for many years in taking content from a brand and moving it to a retailer or a distributor that needs it to run their business. And what we learned a long time ago is that a lot of brands are challenged with that. They don't have some of the content, or they're just not very good at managing it in such a way that it is kept fresh, accurate, complete as related to what the retailers and distributors are looking for. So long ago, we started adding solutions to our portfolio that were very much aimed at helping the brands fill those deficiencies in terms of content creation and content management, and then ultimately distribution. So today we have solutions that range from, Mr. Brand, give me your product and I'll just do it all for you. And we have image studios where we can, produce the imagery that's needed in an e-com context, imagery that's used for planogramming, for in-store experience, those kinds of things. And these days we're starting to add some elements of AI into the aspects of how do you ensure the accuracy of that content and reconcile content that may be coming from different sources, all in the interest of just completeness and accuracy and then ultimately currency. So, those are things that we've been doing for many years, and it's still just a primary focus for us today.
Yeah. And when you think about how you build those customer profiles, obviously, I got to believe data integrity, data accuracy, and the consent to use that data probably go all hand in hand. How do you think about building that in, keeping the data current, the data fresh, and also building up a profile of those customers over time? Because I got to believe that's something that the CPG companies, consumer packaged goods companies, are really thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, just as we continue to advance the ways that we help our target market with the concept of aligning this master data and this content that's going to be used in pretty much all sales channels. That's one of the things that we continue to just evolve and refine, is our understanding of the demographics that, number one, that content is going to serve, but then number two, the personas and the demographics of the folks that interact with that content in a couple of different contexts. And one of them, as related to the conversation today, is really that consumer interaction. And when we look at the solutions that we have that produce that content that really are going to be consumer facing and power a digital experience, we have a number of sets of analytics that relate to different areas of that content that are all intended to understand what is the interaction rate of the consumer. More and more today, one of the things that we just recently added to our portfolio of solutions is in the realm of ratings and reviews and user-generated content, right? So, no more direct interaction with the consumer and getting their sentiments and understandings about products than that. So we're actually learning a lot just from that set of solutions that we'll ultimately can apply to some of our other solutions to really just build that intelligence around who's interacting with the content and what's the net result of those interactions.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned earlier, you were talking about AI and how that's becoming, a key for how you think about building that into your products. Are there some recent examples of how you've been able to incorporate AI into some of the products that you've delivered or developed for your customers?
So just very recently, we introduced a GPT function, so a content generation function that is used by our brand customers to, in some instances, create content that ultimately is going to be surfaced online. And the example that we just released was to create SEO copy in the form of marketing text and feature value bullet points, or YBIs, as we sometimes call it, right? So, nothing, probably not too surprising. You hear the term chat GPT a lot these days, and folks using it to write term papers and stuff like that. We're actually training those models over fact-based data that's in our system, right, to build that content over products that maybe don't exist in the public domain yet, right, which is what often, ChatGPT is looking at things on the internet. So trying to make that kind of capability more specific and more usable is related to something that really doesn't exist anywhere yet. We're already just introducing it to the market. So that's one example. But, where we see more value is using it in more back office situations. You asked earlier about the nuances of product information that may be originating from our brand and maybe the ownership by that brand versus content that we're creating as part of our solutions. And a lot of the content that you'd see surfaced by us online is a mixture of both of those. It originates from the brand, and then maybe we do some things to enhance it, or maybe we create some of that content ourselves. And we look at both of those things happening at the same time. There's this reconciliation requirement that happens there, where you've got to make sure that you're combining that stuff in such a way that it, really accurately represents the brand and the specific product, online. So that's where we're finding more applications for AI, is just in that reconciliation and that cross-checking and the QA exercises that go along with it. So for us, you don't necessarily see it. It's not that exciting to talk about, but that's where we're going to get more value out of it and give more value to our customers.
Yeah, and I got to believe even with obviously the AI tools that you're incorporating, it really does matter about the data that you're putting into the model on the outputs that you actually get, right? So when you think about that and how you think about building, successful experiences and products, are there any trends that you're thinking about on how that could maybe impact how you build a really great customer experience? For example, there's a lot of talk about cookieless world, right? So the concept of third-party cookies going away and the ability to build really strong 360-degree views of our customers becoming challenged there. And would love to hear your thoughts on if that's impacting what you're thinking about for how you build those experiences, or how some of the brands that you work with are thinking about that as well.
Yeah, yeah, all of those things are impacting how we think about a couple of our solutions. And just, to paint a frame of reference for that, we literally have a storefront solution, right? Which, some of our organizations, our customers use that to operate their consumer experience. So clearly there's all kinds of aspects there about, who's signing into that, how do you keep them safe? We're an ISO certified and a SOC 2 compliant platform. And so and that extends across our portfolio of solutions. So we have to kind of keep thinking about that as we add capabilities. They have to fit within those parameters. So there's certainly that aspect of it that we have to consider for sure.
There's probably multiple scenarios where you mentioned kind of like the login and the sign up experience, where you're needing to provide different types of solutions. So you can not only help those customers log in and interact with those brands and obviously your content as well, but also balance the concept between this idea of convenience, right? Giving them really quick access to secure, making sure that there's enough friction involved in that process that it's really secure. How have you thought about balancing, or have you ever thought about even making trade-offs between those two things? And how do you sort of approach that balance between security and convenience?
We think about it within the context of the specific area of solutioning, that we're providing. And when you think of that storefront experience, right, where the consumer's coming in, there's a point in time where you have to have some pretty intimate interactions with that consumer, right? You have to know who he is. How do you ship the stuff from him? There's, some payment, pieces of information that go into that, right? So that context, all the things that you can imagine, that you interact with on a daily basis, anytime you go on to any kind of an e-com shopping site, you end up giving some information there, right? So from our perspective, constantly thinking about how do we keep that secure. And we do, tons of work around that, from a penetration testing perspective and those kinds of things. When you look at some of the other solutions, like just go back to the reviews example, again, it's a direct interaction with the consumer, but you don't need to know very much about that guy, right? So, we think, how do you make it as easy as possible for that guy to write a review, yet still understand enough about who that person is that you can do some sentiment analysis later that's going to be helpful from a demographic perspective. So, those are just two, varying ends of the scale in terms of how we have to think about, how much or how deep we're learning about that consumer and the implications of that, and where we can just not have to go that deep and make it a little bit easier. And as you mentioned, just frictionless for the consumer.
Yeah, and even a lot of what you're describing here as well, we've seen a lot of our customers that are starting to implement systems and solutions around progressive profiling, because no one wants to have to fill out a long registration form or have multiple steps to log in, to interact with that brand. I think that's something that, when we think about that balance of the experience and security or friction, something like a progressive profiling can really help, because over time you're building trust in that relationship with the customer. It's not about getting all those attributes that you mentioned up front. You can do that over time, asking them questions about the brands that they'd like to see or the content that they like to be served, and even the AI tools that you mentioned, being able to leverage that information and that data to better serve them content. Are you thinking about progressive profiling in sort of that capacity as well?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because part of how we've done our platform a lot over the last couple of years is through acquisition. So we've acquired a number of different technology platforms and solutions that we've ultimately integrated into our portfolio. And one of the recent acquisitions going back about 6 months was an organization in Germany. And so if you know anything about Europe and some of the implications over there from a security and privacy perspective,
Yeah.
GDPR and just how they think about PII and so forth, they think about it completely differently. So we very quickly learned a few things from them just about, our interactions with the European market and so forth. But just related to what you're talking about there, we've within our own business for our customers, so not the consumer, but the customers that use our solutions to ultimately interact with consumers. We had an online store that customers could go in and they could, basically buy our products just right off of that store. And we made it as hard as we possibly could on a customer to come in and do that in terms of, we asked them 10,000 questions up front just so that they could, buy something, fairly simple. And again, we didn't think that hard about that until we saw our new organization in Germany and how they think about it. And they've gotten very progressive about how they handle that interaction. And again, for them, it's still a B2B circumstance in which they were, surfacing the same need that we were servicing over here, but just the way that they were doing it were more along the lines of just a softer interaction up front. Let the customer browse the available solutions, and then incrementally get to a point where you could actually execute that transition or transaction. So for us, learned very quickly we were doing it the hard way. They're thinking about it a lot harder and doing it really well. So ultimately, it's one of the things that we'll just adopt across our platform in terms of how we interact with our customer, our consumer, which is that B2B nuance of it. But it goes along those same lines, right? Just progressively learning more about that customer throughout the transaction, so that when you get to the end, you know everything you need to know to actually execute a sale.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Leveraging, you're kind of mentioning too, the zero party and first party data of how they actually interact with not only your site, your solution, but also the content that you're serving too. That makes a lot of sense. Just shifting gears a little bit, and you obviously mentioned One World Sync is a B2B SaaS company. You started out that way, have a solution that services that industry as well. And in B2B SaaS, oftentimes there's this concept of build versus buy, right? It's how can I get to market fast in the most efficient way with the least disruption to my development team so I can build what I need to build and get to market fast. When you're building applications like that, how do you think about that in the development process? Or I should say products, how do you think about that in the development process of some of the products that you build?
Yeah, another great question. So, for about the first probably 17 years of the existence of this organization, of which I watched the first 13 years of that from a distance, but then became an employee about 10 years ago. So started seeing that more up close. But we spent the first, like I said, about 17 years in, it was pretty much build only. We built things, partnered for a little bit, but only if it was, kind of a non-strategic offering. So really focused on just building. And what we realized was we just can't advance fast enough that way. So about 3 years ago, we really shifted into this buy mentality and really just examined our portfolio and where we wanted it to be, in the context of a 3-year, 5-year plan, and looked at where we had gaps as related to our plans. And we just went into M&A mode, and we just started looking for technologies that would fill those gaps. And so build means something different to us today than it did 10 years ago, where build meant we're building every single piece of functionality. Today, build means we're going to take some technology that we acquired and just build the integrations into our core platform. It has been more about buy than it has been about build. And it's just, for us, it just came down to just velocity of building the business. And that was a faster way to get there.
Yeah, getting to market fast. I can resonate with that as well, because I think a lot of our customers that we work with too, that they do the same thing. They might start even a bit smaller and start building out all the systems that they need, thinking, oh, this is no problem. My developers can do this easily. They're builders, they're developers. It's what they do. And then they start heading down this path of, increasing scale requirements and, privacy requirements and more customers and greater demands from customers on privacy and security and also different types of login. And soon it becomes just an impossibility to manage. And it's that almost that user-centric approach that I'd love your thoughts on as well, is considering, leaning more heavily sort of on the buy side, but incorporating those elements of technology into what you're building. how do you still remain focused on a user-centric approach to what you're building so that those customers, those end users, they can't even feel the tech that they're actually using?
Yeah, again, going back to just the concept of integrating this in such a way that it feels like a seamless experience, regardless of which of the solutions you might be interacting with. And literally on a product detail page, you could be interacting independently with 3 or 4 of our solutions. That seamless, fluid experience for the consumer, the integration and how those things interoperate just very much goes into that. So the resources and the talent maybe that goes into some of those aspects, going back to, we were very much a B2B organization for many years, and we didn't think very much about the consumer experience because a lot of the data that we were moving was really oriented to the back office activities of ordering and shipping and warehousing and all of that kind of stuff that you don't really appreciate when you're looking at it online. And so as we started to add some of these more consumer-facing elements to our portfolio, it's really forced us to step back and just go all the way to the beginning and think about how could we do all of that in a different way, knowing that eventually the consumer is impacted, right? So it's just forced us to be much more consumer-centric about how we think about the whole process, and that process we call product content orchestration, right? So how do you sustainably operate this process of creating content, getting it out into the marketplace, understanding how it's doing, and then all the way down to just understanding those interactions with the consumer. So
Right.
today we just think very hard about that. And when we look at the technologies that we've bolted into our platform, the beautiful part about that is you don't just get the technology, you get the people that built it typically, right? And those folks bring along just these perspectives that have just added to our organization in terms of how we think about all of that.
Thinking a little bit about how that plays into innovation, right? And how you pursue innovation. What does that mean to you? Like, what do you think is most important, or what's important to you right now with how you drive innovation at One World Sync?
Yeah, again, a lot has come out of bringing these new technologies into our platform and bolting those in, and it just very quickly opens your eyes to some opportunities that you have to innovate further back in the process, right? So some of the foundational aspects of our platform, what are the things that we could do? And again, a lot of it ties back to content quality and completeness and just those just very foundational aspects of how we serve our target market. But just you learn very quickly about, man, if I just did this better and innovated a little bit harder early on, I'd have a much better end result when I get further downstream and start interacting with some of these other solutions. So for that, it's that aspect of it, just this organic learning based on some of these technologies that we're bringing in. But when you look at our customer base and the interactions that we have with our customers, these are in many cases the largest CPG manufacturers on the planet. You can
Right.
probably name them just based on what's on the shelves in your kitchen, right?
Yeah, looking around.
But then
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. Look around, and they're probably our customer. And then on the retail side, same thing. The biggest retailers, around the planet. Just so we have massive footprint here in North America, but now Europe, big footprint in Latin America. So trust me, they all tell you, where you need to be innovating and what you're lacking and how things could be working better. And that's, today I spend just a ton of my time with some of those enterprise level customers on both sides of the fence, both manufacturing and retail. And that's what I'm there to learn is what should I be doing to service them a little bit better and just make their lives easier, which is ultimately what I'm here for. So.
Right on. And I mean, what are some of those things that are telling you, like in terms of the big trends that you're seeing in your industry and just in technology in general? We talked a lot about AI, but what are some of your big enterprise customers talking about? Like, what are they looking for? What are you seeing in your own industry from a technology perspective that you're really thinking of incorporating into the development process?
Interestingly, the most current trend is, we've spent 3 years thinking so hard about the consumer experience that is the end result of a lot of the data that we move, and we've added so many technologies to that. So when we talk to our customers, deep interest in just intense integration of all of those things for the sole purpose of when they look at their solution matrix today, often they're buying solutions from just countless vendors, and so to now have an opportunity to maybe use solutions from a single platform is super key to them. So integration from a technological perspective, but then also integration from a go-to-market perspective, right? Just making the buying of experience around those solutions easier is just key to all of those guys. But an interesting trend that we've seen here just over the last probably 6 months is this return to the very beginnings of how retailers think about acquiring the content that they need, all the way from just the operational layer of it, the item setup and those kinds of things, and then fast forward to the consumer experience. So as much as just the consumer experience, like how do we get there? Like how do we get there from a master data perspective? And so they're really forcing us to kind of go back a little bit in time and think about how do we apply some innovation earlier on in the process, because to them, the operational aspects are not optional, right? If you don't do that, you cannot run your business as a retailer, right? When you think of the consumer experience, obviously the better it is, the higher performance you're going to have from an e-com perspective. But to some extent, it's kind of optional. I don't have to have some of those aspects, and I just want them, right? So really forcing us to go back and just think about how do we get smarter about the foundational level or layer of our platform, so that we get a better consumer experience down the line.
That's super interesting. Yeah, it almost sounds like to me that it comes down to how do you get better quality data, right, into the process to make better decisions, so that you can drive innovation. That's really interesting.
Yep, 100%.
So then, I suppose building on that as well, what's top of mind for you in your industry right now? What are you thinking about?
Just the AI elements that we're starting to weave into our portfolio. And what we're learning a lot is it's as much as it's about just the technical aspects of how do you use that and how do you refine those capabilities to the context of your solution portfolio and the types of things that you're trying to achieve within that. It's very much about the perceptions of your target market of AI in general, and the tolerance of your customers to interact with AI, right? So we've learned a lot about the AI policy that we have to have as an organization, and that we have to be transparent about with our customers, so that they have a very solid understanding of where we're maybe using AI and where we're not. And then the other thing that you have to be prepared for are the organizations that say in no way, shape, or form should AI be touching my content, right? I don't trust it, and I don't, I'm not there yet, right? So it adds another layer of how you integrate those capabilities into your platform, when for one guy you may have to just turn it off. So for me, that's just front of mind. Probably, for our organization in total, including our engineers and our security teams and so forth. That's just current for us today.
Yeah, and that AI one is a super interesting point for me too. I'd love to stay there for a second as well, because there's so many companies are integrating, Okta included, AI into their core products to make things easier, to make recommendations easier through assistants and copilots, etc. And I know there's a segment of people who are a bit skeptical on the security element, the keeping my data private element. There's just alarm bells that I think that goes off in their heads. How are you thinking about that? Like, how do you educate customers on, it's not disruptive. In fact, it's a technology accelerant to your business. How are you kind of assuring your customers that everything is going to be okay?
Some of what we're doing with AI is back office. So the customers, you could say they'd never know it was there, right? Yeah. With that, we still decided we have to be transparent about things that we're doing with it. The generative AI component that literally allows a brand who's in our platform working on their content to click a button which says, hey, have AI write some content for me based on the other facts that that I've put in the platform. Mm-hmm. Right there on the screen, we have, things like pop-ups and educational things that help them understand, hey, this is what's happening behind the scenes, just so you know. We've got documentation that we share that just explains our position on AI and how we think about it, why we think it's important, why we think it's helpful, and so forth. So some of those educational aspects of it really can be an accelerant to what you're doing with our platform in general. But ultimately, the end goal of just getting to market faster, this is, one thing that's going to help you get there, right? So it's an educational thing. And to be honest, I mean, we've been kind of surprised, as related to the reactions that we've gotten from customers about the use of AI, to the extent that they're just way across the spectrum. You've got some folks that are they're scared to death and very, just a hard position on don't want it. Other folks aren't even thinking about it. Unbelievably, it's like, oh, what's this AI thing, right? And they know what it is, but they just really haven't thought about it. So it made us, it makes us think that we do have to be an educator relative to how AI can impact, what we do for our target market, and just what are the ways that we can do, that we can educate our customers. Again, webinars, educational aspects, and then the things just right within the platform that explain how we're using it and what it's doing.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, the education piece, because AI is more than just an awesome idea, right? It's something that I think you need to do a little education around, and how the data is going to be collected and used, and also giving customers opt-out abilities as well when perhaps they might not want to opt into things like that. So I think that makes a lot of sense as well. Thinking a little more future looking, or even into the next 12 months, what's something that you're excited to launch this year?
Yeah, we're just looking at more sophisticated ways of creating content on behalf of our users. And just one of the aspects that I would refer to is, when you look at the online experience, the first thing you think of is the imagery that's available to you as a consumer, right? And what we've, recognized, we do a lot of consumer surveys to understand how consumers are thinking about their interactions with e-com sites and so forth, because that's, drives a lot of our thinking in terms of what we're going to provide. And what we've learned about consumers is they get more impatient by the day in terms of how quickly they want to learn something about a product, right? To the point where when you think of the text that you see on websites today, nobody reads it, right?
Right.
It's there to power SEO and parametric
Yep.
search and all of that kind of stuff, but nobody's, is going to take the time to read that. And so they're looking for that information in the form of the imagery that they see. And, we think a lot today about, mobile ready hero imagery, right? So I'm on my phone, limited bandwidth sometimes. So I don't want to have to flip through 50 pictures and scroll through a bunch of text and all this kind of stuff. I want to see a picture that has everything I want to learn there. So textual and factual information integrated into that imagery. So that's something that we've got capabilities in that realm today, but we're thinking harder about how do we make that more automatic in terms of the production of that imagery, and using, again, some AI elements to do that. Some of the hero imagery that you see today, where you see a front-facing image of the product and you call out some specific facts about it and maybe quiet down some other things that are happening. There's, things that you can do with AI to understand, what should that look like? What are the facts that you should either, make more obvious or calm down? What is the color schemes that you want to orient that stuff to? So those are some of the things that we're going to just try to make more automatic for the customers, make their lives easier, knowing that it's a consumer requirement today to have those just more comprehensive sets of imagery to make a conversion decision.
Yeah, and I think because that's the key word, or the active word there, is conversions as well, right? It's, we want the experience, but the obvious business goal or outcome is to create a more happy customer, one that will convert, one that will interact with the brands, that will drive revenue. And I think to do that, that's the important piece, is to drive those conversions. You really need to focus on that customer experience. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. That's exactly what you need to think about, is how do you drive, the best experience possible in the least obtrusive way? Because think about this, like, everyone interacts with their brand and their favorite applications on their phone. It's that level of almost invisible hand to the experience that is just, it's an incredible thing. And that really showcases the power of everything that you mentioned, the power of the data that you have, of what you understand about your customer, of the profile and the trust ultimately that you've been able to build with that customer over time. They're going to interact with your brand in a convenient and seamless way. It's going to drive more conversions, and that's such an important point. And even just on that operative word of conversion, I think is a really key one.
It really is. And you mentioned consumer trust, and there's no faster way to break consumer trust than to produce a conversion, only for them to find out that they weren't very well informed about the product, and they get it and it's not what they want, and then they have to return it.
Yeah.
And so we talk a lot about the concept of manufacturing returns by not doing a very good job with the consumer experience, and all of the expense that introduces into the equation when you now have to take that thing back and go through this reverse supply chain situation, right? So we think a lot about about that in terms of, conversion. You want conversion, but it has to be an accurate conversion, or you're just causing a lot of other problems. And then you mentioned that concept of, I buy some, it feels so easy. I just buy it on my phone and then I walk up to this counter and it's
Yeah.
sitting there. All the master data that goes into making that happen, right? Consumer doesn't even know it exists. They don't see it. They don't appreciate it. But if it's not there and it's not right, none of
Yeah.
it works, right? So,
Exactly.
we just always, and again, like I said, our customers are just forcing us to just go back and just continue to fine tune that and just make that more accurate, faster, more efficient, so that buying experience can actually be produced, right?
I feel like it's a really good, point to end on for the segment. But before we do, I want to get some quick hits, just things you're reading, some underrated product skills. So we'll start with this. What is your favorite thing that you're reading or watching right now?
I continue to just educate myself on just the practice of product management, and we follow pragmatic principles
Yeah.
here. Which sounds, it's a fancy word for common sense, I guess, but there are
Yeah.
some, some very specific aspects of how you think about that, right? Just is a problem pervasive? Will somebody pay you for it? All of those kinds of things, and if they'll pay you, how many will pay you? Those kinds of things. So I continue to just read a lot about that, and it's part of my job, and I like to learn more about that. So that's probably the thing that I'm interacting with the most.
That's a really good one. I resonate with that as well because I keep a little pragmatic
You got
marketing
it.
framework on my desk, and the number of
Yeah.
times that I hold that up during the day, it would blow your mind.
Yeah. No, I'm
That's
not
pretty.
surprised. Yeah. I've got the same material. So,
Yeah, I love it. That's amazing. Well, I mean, then based on that, what do you think are some underrated product management skills that you've kind of uncovered, either from Pragmatic or from other places?
yeah, I think, for us, what we really have to continue to just elevate the skill set around just the commercial thinking around your product, right? So it's very easy for product managers to get bogged down in the feature function
Yeah,
and not thinking so hard about how that translates to a commercial outcome for our company, right? At the end of the day, you can, create a product, but if it's not sellable and you can't sell it, that doesn't do you any good, right? So thinking just, what are the commercial aspects of it? How is this going to translate to some kind of a rate card, for example? How is that going to translate to the sales dialogue? And then making sure that your sales team is prepared to actually, execute that dialogue and sell it. And what is the product manager's role in that,
yeah.
right? So that's probably the one thing that we have to just continue to work on the most.
Yeah, it's a very, very pragmatic answer, right? Thinking
Yeah.
about being outside in versus inside out. It's not about what we can build, it's the outcome that it drives for that customer, right? And what is the challenge that we are ultimately trying to solve for that customer. I
Yeah.
like that a lot. What's the best tech advice that you've ever received?
It would be very forward thinking about your product, right? So when you start building something, just think, early on about where do you see this thing in 3, 5, 6 years ago? And I think about that a lot because how I got into this business, that product that we built 20 years ago, we still sell it today. And if I had done that more early on, just, from a technology perspective, just literally the tech stack that we built it on, had I been thinking real hard about it and had some forethought, I probably would have made some different decisions about
Right.
it. So that's just the big thing I think, that just early on I learned that, and a few people helped me learn that, and it was just great advice. And I wish I had just appreciated it more earlier on.
That's awesome. Even bridging into the next question here, what's the best mentor that you've ever had?
Oh man, I just answered this question yesterday, it's a cliche answer and it's pretty boring, but I'd say good old mom and dad, right? So they
Oh,
just
yeah,
taught me
it's a great
early
one.
on, yeah, just be a good person and just work really hard, and good things come from that. And so that's just what I've focused on, and in a variety of ways, just in my professional life and outside of that, try to follow those things pretty closely, and it served me pretty well.
That's a great one. I feel like we should end on that. But before we do, where can folks find you online?
LinkedIn is probably the best place to track me down. Yep. So Randall Mercer, oneworldsync.com there on LinkedIn.
Awesome. That's great. Well, Randy, once again, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Mistaken Identity. I feel like the title of this would be Pragmatic AI if I had to sum it up. Thinking
Yeah.
about how we can build better tools for our customers with an outside-in approach. But I want to thank you again.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for having me on today. I appreciate it.
That was Randy Mercer, Chief Product Officer at One World Sync. As we wrap up this episode, remember that when you're building great customer experiences, our goal as product leaders is to deliver them with the least amount of friction as possible. I'm Matt Deddick. Join me next time on Mistaken Identity as we explore how to leverage customer identity to your advantage and deliver great products that customers love.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mistaken Identity, a podcast brought to you by Okta. As the leading independent identity partner, we free everyone to safely use any technology, anywhere, on any device or app. Find us at okta.com.